I want to bring the order. A phone. She had an injury and is not able to be with us today. So Dr. Holmes, thank you for being here via phone, even though you can't be here in person. With that, I will take a motion to go into executive session.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Ms. Mackey.
I move to convene an executive session for the purpose of student appeals, a breach of contract, and a security briefing.
Motion's made by Ms. Mackey. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Caution Parker. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, is everyone up via digitally? Yes. All right, we'll take the vote digitally. Dr. Holmes, can you hear us? She says she can't hear anything. Okay. Hold on. All right, let me just try to call her here real quick. Hey, are you up digitally? Are you logged in? Are you logged in? Yeah, hold on. Okay, we'll just get you an executive session. Okay, can you just count her as not here for right now, Christine, and we'll get her in the back. Motion passes 6 yes with 1 absent vote. We'll now go into executive session. Can I have a motion to come out of executive session? I guess we need to go ahead and get that on the table.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Ms. Mackey?
I move that the record reflect that executive session was concluded at 6:47 p.m.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Dr. Caution Parker. Any discussion? With no discussion, if we can just do a hand vote on that, if everyone will raise their hand. Dr. Holmes, voice vote. All in favor? Dr. Holmes, voice vote on that, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
All right, motion's unanimous. I will now open up our public input session for the 2022-2023 budget. And I have one person that signed up, Mr. Joe Trapp.
Good evening, everyone. I appreciate this opportunity to share a couple things with you. I wanted to show you this. This is a rubber gasket that our schools are full of. And I really am hoping that I can relay to y'all how important it is that we put some money in the budget for maintenance. I have 35 years experience in the HVAC commercial industry. And one of the things I do is fix leaks, and I've fixed leaks for the school district. And I've been in at least 6 schools in the last couple of years. And our systems are full of these gaskets. Each building, I think, has these in the hallways and the ceilings, and this is part of the HVAC system. It's a recirculating water system, and the gaskets there are old and brittle. This is a brand new gasket. It's really good. The ones that are up in the ceilings are old and brittle. and they eventually start to leak. When they leak, the water gets onto the insulation, mold starts to grow, and when enough of it gets there, it starts to drip and fall onto the ceiling, which then falls onto the floor. And in my opinion, we have basically a ticking time bomb here, because a lot of these are going to start leaking. It's going to be exponential, and eventually they'll all have to be replaced, and that will be very expensive in the next couple of years. And I would ask the board to consider that when you're deciding on our budget, because this is something that we can't overlook, because it's going to become a safety issue if we do. The other thing I wanted to encourage, or I wanted to share experience I've had, I've recently started substitute teaching, and this morning at 6:30 I went online, and there was 164 available positions as of this morning. 70 of them were for today, and that means it's a potential 70 areas where there wouldn't be a teacher today if someone doesn't sign up. I substituted yesterday at Ridgeview High School, and there were 2 openings in the afternoon. I chose one of the 2, and when I arrived at the school, I was informed that I was going to be going back and forth between the 2. And I'm concerned that we don't have enough substitute teachers. I know we're short on teachers too, but when these rooms don't have a teacher in them, learning doesn't take place, and the children perhaps get a little rowdy and out of order. And I would really encourage y'all to do whatever you could to increase the money available to make these substitute teachers a reality. And anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you. I have no one else signed up at this time, but I'm going to leave it open quickly for any other folks who would like to speak on the budget. Okay, I'm going to close the session at this time, and we will now move on to the regularly scheduled meeting. So we will have our inspirational moment, Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Mackey.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. This evening, we will hear from the students who inhabit this building. Jackson Creek Elementary will be presenting some highlights from their culturally relevant practices through music and African Studies class. Mr. Cody Jones, the music teacher extraordinaire, leading student drummers, Ms. Sade Collins, African Studies teacher, and also South Carolina's History Teacher of the Year, yay, and principal extraordinaire, Dr. Maso Taylor, will share a video of artwork in African Studies here at Jackson Creek Elementary, and at this point, I will turn it over to Dr. Maso Taylor, or the students can begin however you have fashioned. Okay, the students will begin at this time. Thank you, Dr. Maso Taylor.
Have to swallow. Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Davis, executive staff, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Jackson Creek Elementary, home of the investigators, where we connect hearts and minds in an effort to reach the highest level of student achievement. Board members and Dr. Davis, as you leave tonight, we'd like for you to take a fern behind you as a token of appreciation for all you do for the students, faculty, and staff in Richland 2. So what you just heard tonight from our wonderful fifth grade students under the direction of our incredible and ever so innovative music teacher, Mr. Cody Jones, is a West African welcome song entitled Funga Alafia. This brief demonstration is how our culturally relevant practices grounds our work and works cross-curricularly. Also here tonight is Ms. Sade Collins. She has a long list of accolades, with the most recent being, as Ms. Mackey shared, the South Carolina History Teacher of the Year, and she was the finalist for the National History Teacher of the Year. And if that wasn't enough, she has also been awarded the 2021 VFW District 2 National Citizenship Education Teacher Award, and only yesterday was yet awarded the National Council for the Social Studies Elementary Level Teacher of the Year Award. She is a featured author in several publications focusing on Africa and African diaspora literacy. And needless to say, the best accolade of all is that she is our very own African Studies teacher here at Jackson Creek Elementary. So each student from kindergarten to fifth grade attends African Studies once a week. It is a part of our related arts rotation. It is funded through our Title I funding, and it's supported through our Title I advisory. Tonight, we bring you a short video providing you with a glimpse of the powerful, engaging learning happening here at Jackson Creek.
Well, since we're a culturally relevant teaching school, and that is practiced throughout the school, it was important that we had one class that focused on African studies so that we could celebrate the students that we had here at Jackson Creek and illuminate the brilliance that emerged from Africa and the contributions that existed, but not only for our Black students, but for all students so that they can understand the richness and the beauty and the contributions that existed from Africa.
My name is Carmen, and I love to come to African Studies, and we get to read the story book, and then we could get to read the song.
Whenever I first heard they were going to do the African Studies, I was excited. I was mainly excited because I know the type of teacher that you are and what the kids would actually get from you being the one to do the teaching. And for them to come home and be like, oh my gosh, Mom, guess what Ms. Collins said, and guess what we learned about.
And my first thoughts after hearing that there would be an African Studies course at Jackson Creek, I was ecstatic. I was so excited for my son to learn lessons that I either wasn't aware of or just hadn't thought to mention or just didn't think to teach him. And I'm really excited that he would get to know more about his heritage in a way that it's one thing to learn from family, it's another thing to learn from someone else. And as much as I can teach him through my lens, it's nice to have other perspectives and lenses as well.
So the work that's happening in African Studies is really working cross-curricularly with math and science and especially ELA and social studies. The children are seeing how those subjects connect, how we connect globally, and how we connect to each other.
One of the books that I see in your classroom are ones that I knew as a child. At one point, I probably could have quoted Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters to someone. And it's exciting to see that even though I might not have kept as in touch with it as I could have as I grew up and just got caught up in the world, that my son can still get some of that teaching somewhere.
I was first excited to learn that there would be a class dedicated to learning about the continent of Africa and its connections to all of us.
The beauty of the African Studies class is that Ms. Collins is making very visible the ways in which we are connected, both close here at home, but globally. And that just illuminates the ways in which that we can serve not only here at home, but across, the nation and the world. Because if we're going to raise global citizens that are ready to lead and excel in their chosen pathways, we need to be able to help them see themselves in the future and of the world and how they can extend what they know and are able to do globally.
Hi, my name is Christina Stout, and I am a kindergarten teacher here at Jackson Creek. I am also a parent to a first grader and a third grader at this school as well. I really appreciate us having an African Studies class because it is so refreshing. I remember growing up in school and learning just about African Americans being slaves. And I didn't want that for my own children. And also for my kindergarteners, they needed to know more about the brilliance that came from Africa. And with our African Studies class, they are able to learn that. They're able to learn African dances, songs, stories from beautiful figures. They know that their ancestors were architects. They were astronomers. They did amazing things. And so their eyes are being opened to learn about this beautiful culture.
When you think about branches of knowledge and all the things that you can give students in any given school, we are remiss when we don't offer them the full story. And that's what we're doing here at Jackson Creek. We are giving our students a fantastic perspective that's often neglected. As a music teacher, I am delighted that we have this program because it connects so much to what I've been working to build over the last 5 years.
Dr. Davis mentioned that part of being premier is that other people are coming to us to look and see what we're doing, how we're doing it. So the African Studies class is premier in that way because we haven't seen that in elementary schools. This is exactly what Dr. Davis is talking about because we are on the forefront of what needs to happen. And so this African Studies class is just another example of being premier in a premier school district.
Thank you for having us. If you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
I'm going to take a point of privilege here. This is one of the things I do miss when, I know when Dr. Scott and I first got on the board, we would go to schools throughout the district, and I do miss this part of it, seeing the students in action and the opportunity to be in the schools where the students are at home. So that was an amazing story, and so thank you, Dr. Masso Taylor, for all your staff, for the work that's being done here. It's incredible, and really enjoyed the presentation. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, we will now move on to approval of the agenda. If I can have a motion.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Ms. Mackey.
I move to approve the agenda for the April 7th, 2022 regular board meeting with the exception of moving item 9.1, which is the update on executive coaching and parliamentary procedure, to the next board meeting, since I think that's something that the board chair wanted to address, and she will be here in person at that time.
Okay, motion's been made by Ms. Mackey. Do I have a second? Seconded by Dr. Caution Parker. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll have the vote. Steve?
Mr. Manning, my vote is yes.
Okay, thank you. Christine, who are we waiting on? Motion passes 6 yes, 1 no. We will now move on to approval of our consent agenda. If I can have a motion.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Ms. Mackey,
I move to approve the consent agenda for the April 7th, 2022 regular board meeting.
motion's been made by Ms. Mackey. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Caution Parker. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we will move on to the vote.
Mr. Manning, I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. And Mrs. Agostini and Dr. Caution Parker, just so y'all know, I can't see you very well down there, so if you need my attention, you gotta work at it just a little bit today, okay?
And Mr. Manning, mine is not popping up. I'm wondering if maybe Steve can come and help me if
Okay,
everybody else is.
absolutely, yeah.
I hit refresh.
Okay, can you voice vote on this one?
Yes, I vote in the affirmative.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes unanimous, 7 yes, 0 no. All right, we will now move on to public participation. If I can, I have one person signed up, Mr. Ethan Lopez.
I have a couple of teachers on the board of South Carolina for Ed who teach at my school. Well, I can appreciate their involvement on trying to make change in our schools. But when you're advocating, but these board members are advocating for teaching children about changing their gender and being gay isn't a teacher's job. This is our parents' job. The board members for South Carolina for Ed are fighting to allow teachers to teach critical race theory in South Carolina schools, to divide teenagers even more than we already are. These members want to teach true history when their version of true history is to teach hate. A board member of the South Carolina for Ed, who is a teacher at my school, said, and I quote, "I have Jewish students, and how can I tell them how oppression on you continues on to the current moment? I can tell you I'm 30% Jewish, 25% Hispanic, and no way am I oppressed because of it. And I don't need a white male teacher to tell me that I am. I will not sit back and be told that white people are the cause of mine and other students' failures because I know the only person in the way of me is me. No white or black person is going to stop me from achieving my goals unless I let them. The goal of some of these members are to promote oppression. They love to see division between black and white kids. The board member of South Carolina for Ed, who is the teacher at my school, said, quote, teachers are leaving because they can no longer teach in good conscience. If not being able to teach children about sex and changing your gender makes you want to leave education, you should have never become an educator or anything that involves being around kids. I appreciate every teacher, don't get me wrong, but I don't appreciate teachers who promote such horrible things. I cannot stand by and let this happen. Me and my friends, your students, had a conversation on what we wanted to do after high school. I said I wanted to change the world. I want to be a politician, help people, and make real change. And all of their responses were, and I quote, I want to live off welfare and food stamps, really anything I can get for free, end quote. If this really isn't a wake-up call for change, I don't know what is. Yes, teachers should teach the way they want, but if you're teaching ELA, math, or history, there should be no reason to talk about changing your sex and being gay. That is not your job. That is our parents' job if they so choose to do so. You teach to teach, not to indoctrinate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. I will say that I hope that folks that have issues at the local level are also engaging their local principals and staff members so that it's not just an issue that's brought before the board, but goes through the proper chain of command when there are concerns within the schools. We will now move on to executive session items. Number 8.1, student appeals, Ms. McFadden.
All right, for student number 1, I would like to make a motion to hear their appeal. Second.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Agostini, I'm sorry, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I know, I want to, if she could restate it, I did not hear it.
Okay,
Thank
please
you.
speak more loudly.
Okay.
No, there's on there.
Okay, I make a motion to hear the appeal for student number 1.
To hear the appeal in person? To hear the appeal in person.
As opposed to?
Just hearing the appeal.
Mhm,
You need
yes.
Okay, can you please restate to say hear it in person?
I make a motion to hear the appeal in person for student number 1.
Okay, thank you. All right, motion's been made by Ms. McFadden. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Scott. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll take the vote. I'm sorry, say again. Dr. Holmes?
Did you not hear me?
No,
Can you
ma'am,
hear
we
me
didn't
now?
hear you. No, what is your vote? What's your vote for student number 1?
I'm gonna vote in the affirmative.
In the affirmative, okay. Motion passes 4 yes, 3 no. We will now move on to student number 2.
For student number 2, I move to deny the appeal.
Motion's been made by Ms. McFadden. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, was that Ms. Agostini down there on the end?
Me.
Ms. Mackey? Okay, second by Ms. Mackey. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll take the vote. And Christine, feel free to tell me if I'm moving too quickly.
Mr. Manning, was that to deny the appeal? I didn't hear it.
It was to deny the appeal, yes.
I vote in the affirmative.
Motion passes unanimously. Student number 3.
For student number 3, I move that he be or she be going to Blythewood Academy.
All right, motion is for Blythewood Academy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Any discussion? With no discussion, we'll have the vote. Dr. Holmes?
Okay, I vote to deny.
That's not a vote.
I'm sorry, vote in the affirmative. I was on the wrong one. Affirmative.
That's fine. You vote in the affirmative. Okay, thank you.
Mr.
This is very hard on the phone. I'm sorry, I can't really see it.
Ms. Mackey?
I know that we're in the process of voting, but could I recommend that Ms. McFadden add LORADAC services?
Well, the motion's already been made and seconded, so.
Understood.
Yep. Yeah. Motion passes unanimous 7-0. Ms. McFadden, student number 4.
For student number 4, I move to deny the appeal with Lorraine Act Services.
I'm sorry, Ms. McFadden, but are you denying the appeal or are you asking for Blythewood Academy with Lorraine Act? With deny, there's no Lorraine Act.
Repeat that.
Okay, so just to be clear, if you deny the appeal, Lorraine Act is not an option. If you're asking for the student to go to Blythewood Academy with Lorraine Act, that's an option. So we need to.
Okay, I'm going to stick with what I have. We're just going to deny the appeal. I move to deny the appeal for student number 4.
So no, Lorraine, deny the appeal.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Student number 4, deny the appeal is the motion. Do I have a second? Seconded by Dr. Caution Parker. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we will have the vote. Dr. Holmes, you heard that is denied, so what's your vote on that?
I'm going to vote in the affirmative.
Motion fails 3 yes, 4 no.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Ms. Mackey?
I move that for student number 4, be admitted to Blythewood Academy with Lorraine Act Services.
Okay, student number 4, the motion on the table is Blythewood Academy with the Lorraine Act. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll take the vote. Dr. Holmes?
Affirmative. Vote in the affirmative.
The second was Mrs. Agostini. Yep. Christine, who are we waiting on? Oh, there we go. Vote passes 6 yes, 1 no. Now on to student number 5, Ms. McFadden.
I move to deny the appeal for student number 5.
Motions were made to deny the appeal. Do I have a second? Seconded by Dr. Caution Parker. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll have the vote.
Voting in the affirmative.
Motion fails 3 yes, 4 no. If I can have another motion.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
it was me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Mack.
I move that for student number 5, go to Blythewood Academy.
All right, student number 5 to Blythewood Academy. Do I have a second?
Second.
I can't see or hear anything. Dr. Scott, did you second that?
Yes.
Okay, second by Dr. Scott. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll take the vote. Y'all are going to have to bear with me. I don't know why, but I'm struggling putting voices and faces together today, so y'all please bear with me.
Mr. Manning, I vote in the affirmative.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes 6 yes, 1 no. We will now move on to student number 6. Ms. McFadden?
I move that student number 6 go to Blythewood Academy.
All right, recommendation for Blythewood Academy. Do I have a second? Seconded by Dr. Scott. Is there any discussion? All right, with that, we'll take the vote. Dr. Holmes?
No.
Okay. Motion fails 2 yes, 5 no. If I can have another motion.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Ms. Mackey?
for student number 6, I move to deny the appeal.
All right, motion made to deny. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll have the vote. Dr. Holmes? Dr. Holmes?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It hung up.
Okay.
Did you hear my vote on the other one?
We're on the motion is to deny the appeal at this point for student number 6.
Vote in the affirmative.
Vote in the affirmative. Thank you. Motion passes 5 yes, 2 no. We will now move on to student number 7, Mrs. McFadden.
I move to deny the appeal for student number 7.
Second.
All right, motion made by Mrs. McFadden, seconded by Ms. Mackey. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll have the vote.
Mr. Manning, vote in the affirmative.
Thank you very much. Motion passes unanimously 7-0. Student number 8, Mrs. McFadden.
I move that student 8 be recommended for Blythewood Academy.
All right, student number 8 to Blythewood. Do I have a second? Seconded by Dr. Scott. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll have the vote. Dr. Holmes?
I vote no.
Motion fails 2 yes, 5 no. If I can have another motion.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Ms. Mackey?
I move for student number 8 to deny the appeal.
Motion's been made to deny. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Caution Parker. Is there any discussion? With that, we'll have the vote.
Mr. Manning, I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. Motion passes 5 yes, 2 no. And with student number 9, Mrs. McFadden.
I recommend that we deny the appeal for student number 9.
All right, motion to deny. Do I have a second? Seconded by Ms. Mackey. Is there any discussion? No discussion. We'll have the vote. Dr. Holmes?
I vote in the affirmative.
Did the motion just go? I don't think I saw a vote. There we go. Okay. Motion passes 6 yes, 1 no. Next, we have breach of contract. Ms. McFadden.
I move that we direct the administration to make a formal complaint to the State Board of Education regarding a professional employee who breached their employment contract with the district.
Thank you. Motion made by Ms. McFadden. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Caution Parker. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll take the vote. Dr. Holmes?
Mr. Manning, I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. Motion passes 5 yes, 2 no. There are no other items under 8.3. We will now have, 9.1 was tabled to the next meeting. So we will move on to 10.1, a report on the Richland 2 highlights. Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Vice Chair and Mr. Vice Chair and our board, to the members that are viewing us live stream and those of you who are in attendance this afternoon, good afternoon or good evening. I am presenting to you today at this board meeting the district highlights. And so in the spirit of demonstrating the Richland 2 Premier Way, our highlights are organized around our 4 core values of learning, character, community, and joy. And I will begin with learning, which is the cornerstone of all that we do in Richland School District 2. For the second time in 5 years, Westwood High School has earned Cognia's STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics certification. Westwood is in an elite group of schools nationwide with this mark of STEM distinction and excellence only offered to highly effective institutions that prioritize STEM education as a path to success. So congratulations to the Westwood family. In the area of our community, district leaders networked and connected directly with community partners last week at the inaugural Partner Summit held here at R2I2. Business, industry, higher education, and faith community members exchange ideas and thoughts on how to create mutual beneficial relationships and partnerships that ultimately help students prepare for their futures. Each April, we celebrate a very, very important part of our community. This April, as in all Aprils, we are celebrating military families. April is the month of the military child. The focus this year is on the overall mental health and well-being of military children of all ages and providing support to help military children, youth, teens, and parents thrive. April 22nd is Purple Up Day, a day where we wear purple in Richland 2 to support military children. April is also National Athletic Training and School Library Month. We also celebrate National Administrative Professionals Day on April 27th, and this week is National Assistant Principals Week. Ooh. The character portion of our report focuses on lessons that were taught by Bookman Road Elementary School during Don't Miss My Abilities Week. Bookman Road is taking inclusion very seriously, and as beacons, they pride themselves in taking opportunity each day to show this. As a Special Olympic Unified Champion banner school, they strive to educate students on what it means to be accepting of others and their differences. Through understanding, they can learn what it's like to walk in the shoes of others and to help to break down walls and barriers that might exist. Last month, they celebrated Beacons with Differences during Don't Miss My Abilities Week. Each day they wore a specific color representing a group of beacons and others who deal with some type of differing ability. Blue for autism, purple for medical differing abilities, yellow for those with learning, speech, emotional, or developmental differing abilities, and gray for those with hearing impairments. And now for some joy. Kirsten Bulletin, Next Energy Engineering Instructor at Richland 2 Institute of Innovation, Student Innovation Center, is South Carolina's 2022 STEM Educator of the Year. Let's give her a round of applause. Another statewide recognition for our staff in Richland School District 2. The award honors educators who are making a significant difference in the lives of students by providing an excellent curriculum, encouraging lifelong learning, and inspiring a passion for science, technology, engineering, or math beyond the classrooms and into the future. And the Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps drill team at Spring Valley High School is the best in the state. The Spring Valley bested 19 other schools over 14 categories of regulations and precision drill maneuvers to win the coveted title for the second year in a row at the Top Gun drill meet at McIntyre Joint National Guard Base. And I'll end the highlights with a reminder that next week, April 11th through the 15th, is spring break. Schools and the district office will be closed. We will reopen and classes will resume on April 18th. Over spring break, I would love and like to encourage everyone to take time to practice some self-care and to spend time with family and friends. Best wishes to everyone for a safe and enjoyable break. And that concludes our district highlights.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Lots of great highlights. Next, we'll move on to 10.2, an update on the month of the military child. Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board and our community, we will have our update on the month of the military child, which will be provided to us by Ms. Kelsey Carter, who served as our military liaison here in our district. Ms. Carter.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Davis, those that are present here and those that are virtual. I'm just going to provide a brief highlight of what we are doing this month. This is a very exciting month for us, month of the military child. And as we know, next slide, Tony, please. April is designated as month of the military child. As a Purple Star district, we understand the unique challenges that military-connected students have to deal with. We also celebrate the military child for April. Was designated as the month of military child, as we mentioned before. It's a time to honor the sacrifices made by these students worldwide, both here in the States and overseas. Next slide, please, Tony. I'm going to just provide quick highlights of some of the activities that we are implementing and initiatives that we're bringing forth for Month of the Military Child. We have a calendar that interactive calendar that we've put in place. And Tony, if you can bring that up, thank you. And I'll just keep talking while it's coming up. Okay, and all of this information is going to be posted, and some of it is already on our district's websites, and we're tweeting out information daily. And just to highlight a few areas on the calendar, yesterday I was able to attend the proclamation at our governor's home, where he designated April as Month of the Military Child. So I was able to attend that. On Monday, we're showcasing stories of military children, just sharing their stories. It's going to be featured on our websites and tweeting those out throughout the month. Also, after spring break, as Dr. Davis mentioned, spring break is next week. After spring break, we will kick off our Spirit Week, which is awesome. We get a lot of participation from our district office, and this year we're doing it district-wide. So a lot of our schools are participating in Spirit Week. We start off, as you can see on the calendar, Camo Day. We do red, white, and blue. And then we culminate all that ends on Purple Up Day, which is the 22nd. So I expect everybody to have on their purple. Dr. Davis, you already have yours on today. I'm sorted by it too. But pulling purple out, and we expect people to take pictures and post them to our Twitter pages and our social media accounts. A lot of people often ask why the color purple. And if those of you who don't know that, some of you military connected folks do know that blue, Air Force, I think Navy and Coast Guard have all shades of blue in their branches, green for Army, and then of course red for Marine, and all together that creates the color purple. I also like to send a quick shout out and thanks to board members who have already signed up to read and share stories with our students that week. So many of you have already signed up, and I appreciate that very much. We also have members of our military community at Fort Jackson who will be coming out the following week, including General Michaelis' wife, Mrs. Michaelis, will come out and read to a couple of our schools as well, to our students. And so this just kind of a quick highlights, and the last couple of slides before I sit down, just wanted to give you a quick information on our statistics, where we are with our military connected students. We are still at about 20.5% of our students are military connected in our district, which is we still are have the highest number of military connected students in the state of South Carolina. And then the last slide is just some information about our families. There are 12,533 families, military families in the state of South Carolina, and we represent about 20.3% of those families. So, it's very important that we recognize these students and we celebrate them this month and beyond. So that's it. I told you be brief, but I can go on and on about all the great things we're doing for our military families, working with our Fort Jackson Adopt a School program. So our schools are doing enormous and really neat programs and activities to celebrate our students.
Thank you so much. Board members, questions or comments?
Yes, Mr. Manning.
Ms. Mackey?
Just wanted to say to Ms. Carter, thank you for sharing with us. And that was brief. You usually have time to share, but I know you have been busy. Just thank you for what you do to support not only our military families, but to keep us abreast of what's going on. There are more support systems in place than you have time to share here at the podium. But just thank you for all the, and for your passion. To see you present at different places throughout the district and the state is just an inspiration to see how well you represent us. But thank you for all that you do, and we appreciate our military families.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other board members, questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, next we have on our agenda item 10.3, an update on legislative issues. Dr. Davis.
Yes, we thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. We have Ms. Maria Owens. Sorry, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. As a member of our board and community, we have Ms. Maria Owens, who's going to share with us a legislative update for the April 7th board meeting. Ms. Owens.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, and good evening, Mr. Vice Chair and honorable board members. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I am not Libby Roof, but I am happy to be here to bring the legislative update to you this evening. As you'll see as we go through our presentation tonight, our South Carolina legislature has been incredibly busy since the board docs were shared with you last Thursday. That is because today is the crossover deadline, meaning that if a bill is not voted on in the House or the Senate by today, it most likely will not cross over to the other body, meaning that it is very difficult to get that legislation through during this session. So this was a key date today. The House for our, starting with the education spending accounts, education savings accounts, the House Bill 4879, the House adjourned debate on the 6th, meaning that bill is no longer up for debate. However, Senate Bill S 935, on March 31st, the Senate did pass that bill after they considered more than 40 amendments. They did not pass most of those amendments, but that did pass the Senate, so will now be debated in the House. Moving on to curriculum and instruction, as you will recall, there were 5 individual bills that were initially presented to the House Education and Public Works Committee. They had 3 public hearings for input. In the end, they decided to create their own committee bill, taking pieces of each of the other 5 pieces of legislation. That bill is H 5183, and it is called the South Carolina Transparency and Integrity in Education Act. Now, on March 30th, it was introduced to the full House. It was on the calendar for the 31st. It has continued to be on the calendar, but as of today, it was never voted on, so it did not meet the crossover deadline. Other education bills, all of the first 4 Senate bills, booster clubs, school board meetings, displays of official mottos, and child identification kits, those were all passed by the Senate, so those have crossed to the House, and now the House will debate those. H 3126 was already with the Senate. They amended that one and passed it back to the House because the House will now have to consider the Senate's amendments. And updates on all of these are in board docs for you, specific updates. Continuing with other education bills, H 3590 for non-certified teachers, that has gone to the Committee of Conference with Representatives Allison, Felder, and Alexander, so they will debate it in committee. H 5074, the House did pass that, and it has gone to the Senate. And then S 53, the South Carolina Juvenile Justice Reform Act, which had provisions that would have affected K-12. The Senate Judiciary Committee liked it and gave a favorable report. It was on the Senate calendar for today, but it's been contested. So that did not get voted on either. Continuing on to other education bills. S 544, open enrollment. The Senate began debating that bill, but debate was adjourned with no action taken. So again, that was not voted on. S 531 and H 4608, the House did pass their version of the Save Women's Sports Act on April 6th. On the same day, it was read in the Senate, and then they referred it to the Committee on Education. The Senate version is still on the calendar for the full Senate. S 203, removal of school district trustees and filling vacancies. The Senate adopted the conference committee report, but the House has to go over that report before they send it to the governor. And again, full updates are on board docs for you. Senate budget dates. Today is the last day for budget subcommittees and their proviso recommendation. Next week, there will be deliberations with the full Finance Committee. Moving on to debate at the end of April. By mid-May, their schedule says that they will have their conference committee and their report delivered to the governor. Those are scheduled dates. And as always, we have our links for you for the calendars, the meeting schedules. We have our Richland County delegation for the Senate and the House. And that concludes the legislative update.
Wow, that's a lot going on. Board members, questions or comments?
Ms.
Mackey.
I know that was tough to get through. Thank you for providing that for us. A lot of moving parts. Thank you for that, you filled in nicely.
Thank you.
All right, other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much. All right, we'll now move on to 10.4, an update on the budget. Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, to our community that's here with us today, and those that are viewing live stream, we have our Senior Chief Finance and Operations Officer, as well as our Chief Financial Officers, to present to you a budget update for the April 7th board meeting. Dr. Miley.
Good evening. We'll tag team this presentation. I'll start off with a brief introduction and go over the budget survey for employees and the survey from the board. And in your packet, you'll see a chart with the responses. We had 4,487 questionnaires had gone out to employees. Thank you. So we sent out 4,487. We had 1,716 returned. That's a response rate of 38.2, which is slightly below our last few years. But when you send out a survey, as Dr. Coleman would explain and has explained in other surveys, 38% return is usually pretty respectable. And so that's what we have this year. And the breakdown that you have on this first chart shows you where they come from, whether it's a classroom, instructional support. I think it's important those first three categories are all certified employees, and about 70% of the respondents are certified employees. The second half of that is where they work, whether it's at elementary school, child development, middle school, and as you see, the largest section is from elementary schools, 44.6%. The ranking of the survey, we've done this in the past. The ranking of the survey, as you see on the next page, I've grouped them into several sections. I think that, in my opinion, the first four are clearly the strongest priorities of our employees. They're, as you can see on the weighted scores on the far right corner, on the far right column, those four weightings for those first four priorities are far above any of the others. So I kind of separated them between several sections. The first four are clearly, in my opinion, the strongest consensus of priorities for our employees: employee compensation, academic intervention for lower achieving students, student behavioral support, behavioral interventions, mall monitors, etc., and student support services, psychologists, social workers. Those have a different tier of weightings and scoring from our employees. The next section, priorities 6 through 10, special education, arts, safety and personnel equipment and security, CAPE programs, diversity, multicultural inclusion, and preschool education are the second tier. And as you see, the next groups are much farther down the list, and from 11 through 16, there's still priorities for some. As you'll see, all and the diversity that we have in the respondents and the opinions of our employees, as you can see, all of them ranked number one rank by someone. And so that there's somebody in our district who ranks every one of these things as number one, and that's clear. As you can see, the employee compensation was ranked by half of the respondents as its top priority. We also asked what were the lowest five of the following, the lowest five categories in terms of priorities. And as you can see, they're not ranked by order, but as you can see, the ones that kind of stand out a little bit are athletics and non-instructional extracurricular activities, diversity and multicultural education, gifted and talented, magnet programs, professional development, and world language instruction are those that stand out a little bit stronger in terms of the priorities and the support behind them. The next section, the next chart is our board survey. We had, as you know, we have 7 board members. We had 5 members respond to the survey. We do these anonymously, both by employees and by the board. We don't know the employees that respond, and we don't know the board members that respond. The system knows if they didn't, so that's how we can send out reminders, but we don't individually know who those people are. As again, the board's priorities can kind of be lumped together. The first 5 are much stronger weighting and higher priority, but employee compensation, personal protective equipment, safety and security. We're hoping this next year's budget survey will not need to include personal protective equipment, but we're hoping that by next year we'll just have safety and security as a priority item. Academic intervention for lower achieving students is very close to the employee, and student behavior support and interventionists and CAPE programs. Those are very similar, except for the CAPE program. They're very similar to the priorities of our employees as well. The next grouping I look at for maybe 6 through 9 instructional technology, diversity, multicultural education, gifted and talented, and then student support services. And then the last 10 through 16 are kind of the least awaited ones. But as you can see, again, we have several different priorities in terms of individual board members who think one thing is more important than others. As you see, employee compensation was the most important by one board member. Safety and security was by two, was ranked number one by two board members, and then student behavior support was also ranked by number one by two board members, excuse me. And the last thing is, again, it's not quantified, but as you can see, those factors that did score higher in terms of the frequency, in terms of the priorities, the items that were lowest in priorities. We've had several comments. We had about, well, I spent 3 hours reading them. We had multiple comments from all employees, and one of the things that saw over and over again, and I think several board members also made the same comment, is that they're all priorities. We don't want to eliminate any of them, but again, trying to get some gauge of relative priorities, that all of these things are important for all of us, and that different people have different opinions on which one's the highest priority. Be glad to answer any questions. If you don't, I'll be glad to turn this over to Ms. Allen.
Board members, questions or comments for Dr. Miley on this section of the budget update?
Mr. Vice Chair.
Ms. Agostini.
Thank you. My question is, why would we be, or I'm curious, help me understand why we would be paying for personal protective equipment out of our general fund money and not be using the CARES Act money and the ESSER funds to cover such expenses?
We are using those other sources of funds, but if it's a priority, again, we're asking for input from everyone on their priorities, and we still want to know whether that's a priority or not.
Okay, I mean, I guess, and I'm wondering if people understand that we've got the CARES Act money. Does that, it would seem to me that we would use, it's my opinion, focus for the personal protective equipment under some of the ESSER funds and not draw from the general fund for it. That's just my opinion.
I can help a little bit.
Go ahead. Dr. Davis.
Yeah, just to try to help a little bit. I think that's a great question that Ms. Agostini is asking, but many of these categories have multiple funding sources, so they're not all funded solely from the general fund. So there could be other categories that we have here that we may get some additional funding that may come to us from gifted and talented. We may give funding that helps us with IT. We can get funding that helps us Title, I think 2 or 3 funds that help us with professional development. So there are multiple categories on here that comes from different funding sources. It's just to give us some sort of an insight of where there may be priorities. So where we may not be able to fund those from general fund money, once we've allocated a general fund, it does give us some insight of where we can direct some of those specialized fundings in areas of importance. So I do believe that the vast majority of our district employees understand that we have CARES money, and we've been using CARES money for the last couple of years to help us with PPEs.
That's a good point. We have special education funding.
Right.
We got CAPE funding, et cetera. But again, trying to get the perspective of what our employees and the board's priorities.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but we can use ESSER money for other things, so that also helps us direct some of our ESSER expenditures, whether that be more in the area of PPE or other things that are available to us.
Well, and also the ESSER funds are, we don't have total discretion over those in the first place.
Right.
They tell us you can spend it on these 10 buckets.
Right, but we have discretion within the bucket, so
Correct,
we could
exactly.
use other.
And like I said, again, we're hoping that this time next year, we can just have safety and security on that line, but we felt like it was still included this year.
I'm sorry, Ms. Agostini, any other questions? Ms. McFadden?
Yes, so from the last budget that we had last year, are we taking any of those priorities at all that maybe didn't get on our list are we going to flip those over or relook at those before we go further? Because I know there were some things on there, there was like a green line on here of things that didn't make it onto the budget for last year. And then there were some things that we may not have been able to do or didn't have the money to spend. So is there a way we can see where the things that we wanted on there that did get done were paid for? And then is there room for those things that maybe 32 through 41 we can do this year?
I assume you're talking about individual project line item things that were discussed and prioritized, and some of those individual line items did not make it into the budget. Those would be under consideration for this year as well. Again, those were based on priorities of the district at that time, and so we would do the same thing. We'll end up with another list this year that won't all be funded, but some of those things could be items that did not get funded last year, absolutely.
One other comment is I got a couple of emails from some constituents, and they weren't really sure where to go or what the budget would look like. They were actually looking for a budget that they would be able to look at to come to public participation.
Yes, we've had several questions, and we have not posted a proposed budget yet. We have not developed one. We'll be talking about that again tonight. But so far, we've just been trying to figure out what the state is doing before we try to develop a budget for the district. Yes, ma'am.
So for the April 26th, they had some questions that they wanted to know about, increase in cameras and things like that. How is it that we can convey to them how they can put a list together or come up with a list and come in here? Because a lot of the emails were like, well, I don't even know what the budget is or where it looked like. And I just told them to go look at the one that we had last year and see what was on there. So they were just kind of at a loss of how to go about coming and what they would talk about and ideas. So how could we, as a board or something?
Well, Dr. Milam, if I can speak to this. So typically at this point in the budget process, we survey staff, we get feedback from the public as to the areas. So I saw some of the concerns you brought up. People asked about cameras and other things, some of which are already underway within our bond and other work that's going on in the background. But the public feedback that we get from these public input sessions, questions from the public that we get in emails, the surveys that kind of direct staff, all that goes into a proposed budget that will come to us. But at this point, there's not a budget to say, I like or don't like this. The question is, what would you like to see? If you would like to see it, please tell us so that we can put it on, that we can consider it for a proposed budget that will be coming to us soon. So I think what they're asking for is a little bit early in the process. Then the proposed budget will come, and at that point, the public or board members can then question, we like this or we don't like that, and ultimately the board decides what the final budget looks like. But this is input so that they know what to consider. And again, just because somebody asks for it doesn't mean that we'll get there. There's a lot of priorities. It's amazing to me every year the increased cry from teachers for social emotional support seems to continue to be at the top and one of our number one growth areas for consideration. But does that help Mrs. McFadden understand where we are in the process? Go ahead and speak in your mic. I'm sorry.
Yes, I do understand, and that's what I was trying to convey to constituents, because they were just not grasping. They were looking for a budget. So maybe if we could provide, okay, so last year we had like social emotional, what would you like to see some under social emotional, some ideas, PPE if that's what we're going to do, or if you want, teacher salary and increase, those kind of things, or if you want more after-school programs, just something like that to give them an idea of what they can request, because it's like right now it's just like, give us some ideas, and they're like, well, I really know where to start. So that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, but I think it's hard. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? I mean, I think it's hard for staff to say this is things under consideration and then put it out there for the public to say I don't like it versus folks really coming up with areas that they want to see happen. Shelley?
And I would just add quickly, many school districts only do one public budget input session. It's required by law. They actually have to post a ad in the newspaper advertising the public here, and they call it a public hearing. There are districts that I've been in before. That's all they did. They did not have any other public input sessions. Many years ago, we decided here we wanted to have multiple input sessions, not just one, because by the time the public got to come to that hearing, decisions had already been made. And so the feedback we got was we weren't involved in the beginning. We didn't have a voice in the beginning. So that's part of why we started doing additional public input sessions. And like tonight was the first one. And I think we have another one, and then the public hearing. So I think that was our intent, not to come with our predetermined recommendations, but to open it up for everyone, just like we have the open-ended questions on the employee survey. So we will be taking all of that in and looking at the priorities and evaluating that during the process. There also are some other avenues. We may want to post something a little more glaringly. There is a budget email address that they can email. Also, there have been numerous people that have gone through the K-12 Insight, which that tends to be a very common outlet. So I think we got one this week from someone who wasn't going to be able to be here tonight, but they sent in a recommendation and comment. So that is on the list. You know, the big master list, as Harry was referring to, going through all of those comments, you know, all of that will be factored in, and then the priorities will be discussed. So
Well, I'll say this to the public. If you want to get a guideline on the June 29th, 2021 board docs, you can go on there under budget, and there is one of the priorities from last year that you can kind of glean from and look on there just to give you a basic idea of what the priorities from last year look like if you want to have a base to start.
Other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Shelley.
okay, I wish I could tell you we were totally done, but we're not. We're not quite yet. Sorry. I will try and go a little more quickly tonight so that we're not here too terribly late. But last board meeting, we covered a lot of information, and it was a lot of new information, and I know it was a lot of details. So we wanted to kind of just go back over some things, just really big picture, and explain, clarify, or just make sure everyone's aware of some of the concepts that relate to this new funding model. I will say, just as an update overall and tying in with the legislative piece, the discussion of the budget now is in the Senate Finance Committee. They have been discussing things this week. I actually was able to go and had some folks in our school business official group actually speak to them about some of the questions we had. So I'm gonna kind of walk through this real quickly. These were some of the overview slides that a lot of folks saw in the governor's press conference. So a couple of the things we want to go through is just kind of mention, you know, what we're seeing related to some of these things. So the new funding model is driven by, as we stated last time, the statewide student-teacher ratio and the number of students being served. One of the things that has perplexed several of us veteran school business officials trying to really understand the dynamics of this new funding model is that the funding model is supposed to be based on a statewide student-teacher ratio, and which gives them supposedly the teachers needed for funding the program, okay? So in my mind, those are the variables that are going to be used to calculate the revenues, and then they're going to be spread by weighted pupil units, weighted pupil units. One of the concerns or questions, or again, just being generally perplexed, is as we've gone through and gotten information first through the governor's executive budget, then through the House Ways and Means projections, and then now through the House, what we've seen is we started with an 11.7 statewide student-teacher ratio in the governor's proposal. And in that proposal, there were 64,000 plus teachers needed to fund the program, okay? Well, then it went, and basically the House House Ways and Means adopted that version with a little variance in the dollar amounts and what they were going to increase the teacher salary portion or increase for the state minimum teacher salary schedule. And so that 11.7 and 64,000 changed. And in the House Ways and Means version and projections we got, there was a ratio of 11.2 and total funded teachers of 67,000. Then when we got the projections for the House, the target student-teacher ratio changed to 10.9, and the teachers needed for funding changed to 68,000. So that's one of the pieces that kind of perplexes us. If those are the variables driving the allocation, why are they changing during this whole process when the only thing really changing is funding or how much they're paying teachers? It's just very complex to understand and make relatable for folks. So I wanted to just bring that to everybody's attention because that targeted number is a moving target, and it just makes it very complicated in trying to understand the calculations. A couple other things I want to highlight. I'm going to try not to go through and read all this stuff, so you guys can all go back and read it, and it's out there on board docs. But wanted to remind you of a few things that aren't included in this new funding model. There are no recognitions of growth. There is not inclusion of the costs that we would have to incur for a step increase for teachers, does not consider operational costs, and an array of other positions that are still needed for us to educate children. The other piece is there are no proposed changes to the mandates that were created under Act 388. That is going to create a lot of challenges for districts as flexibility is being discussed. And that is another term that has gotten thrown out a lot, flexibility. And one of the things that we have questioned is how much flexibility do we really have if we don't have the ability to generate local dollars to fund some of the things that we need. So that's been something else that has been brought up during this process. One of the other things that's been put out is that that these state funds are now following students. Well, as you recall, under the old EFA formula, the funds followed students, and it was very clear that they followed students. We actually had a base student cost. So if you called and said, how much is the state giving us in EFA for each pupil, I could tell you that because there was a set amount. This new funding model does still allocate using those student counts. It just becomes very muddied when you factor in, we're really not funding students per se, we're funding teachers now, a certain teacher level. So for me, it still follows students, but it's not as clear and evident. It's much harder to determine that amount without going through calculations. This was just a little bit of information I wanted to add about the old EFA funding to just remind everyone that whole process was actually funding a defined minimum program, a foundational program, and it was allocated based on student cost. Every district's receiving more money. Again, that is a statement this week in the Senate's Finance Committee meetings. I heard that referred to several times. Every district is receiving more money. No district is losing money from last year. That is an absolutely true statement from the standpoint of the numbers and projections we've seen. They have hold harmless money in the calculations, and so every district is receiving more money than they did last year. The problem with that is they may not be receiving enough money to cover the mandated increases for next year. Currently, and this is something we talked about last time, the current appropriations bill does not have the flexibility they originally intended in it. It still has language that would require us to actually increase that full $4,000 per teacher. The Senate is very aware of that. They stated that this week, and they stated that they fully intend to correct that, but made it very clear that that was never the intent and that will be corrected with whatever comes out of Senate. So they are going to put in basically the provision or change the language so that districts have flexibility to not give a $4,000 increase to teachers. We will have the flexibility to determine if we want to give an increase, if we already are above that minimum, or what that increase might be. The problem is the equivalent funding that we will have at the state level is not going to fund. It's probably not going to fund a step, much less an increase to the salary schedule. So there have been a lot of folks disturbed by the fact that that flexibility is there, but it's like saying you can go spend this money in your bank account however you want, but when you go look, there's $5 and it's not going to go very far. So there is more money for everyone, but there are also a lot of increases in the mandates. One of the other things, they are pulling that state minimum starting salary up to $40,000, which is absolutely something that needs to happen. It has been stated that is fully funded. By definition of the calculation, it isn't fully funded. The formula still includes 75% state, 25% local. So by definition of the model, it's not fully funded. So I just want to make sure everybody understood that, because I've heard so many times, you're getting 100% of the money to cover it anyway. What are you doing with it? That's not the case. And again, just a reminder of that, that is based on what the state minimum is, not what our district salary schedule is. All right. Another aspect has been the online disclosure requirements, which we do not have information yet on. They have not developed that. I think the State Department of Education and potentially other agencies will be tasked with coming up with that. There is supposed to be an additional dashboard, but I just wanted to make sure everyone understood, because again, I heard in some of the meetings, it brought up multiple times how we needed to be transparent with all of our spending. Well, I just want to make sure everybody understands, I don't know of any other agencies that have to be as transparent as school districts do. We have to report on our website, on our monthly transparency reports, every expenditure that we have over $100. Every check we write, every procurement card payment we make in detail has to be posted out there for everyone to see. In addition to that, we have requirements at the State Department of Education level. We have to report with our audit report. We have annual administrative cost reporting that all of this is available to the public, annual insight reporting, and new ESSA reporting, which basically translate into some of the report card data you see. So again, I just want to make sure everybody understands, I'm not sure what the dashboard is going to look like. I'm sure it's going to provide some very valuable information, but I don't want anyone to feel like we have not had requirements in place already to be transparent, because we have. And then the last thing is the increase to the employer cost of benefits. While the state is providing funding to cover at least a portion of the increase in health insurance, we don't have all of that information yet, so we don't know to what extent. Likely it's going to be based on that 75% formula based on what we know at this point. But that insurance piece is not even included in this new model. It is funded separately. So wanted to bring that to light as well. Any questions on those few slides, and just kind of going back over that big picture view this time? We have one last slide where we're going to talk about revenue projections and get it in a little bit of detail, but just any questions about what we've discussed so far?
Question. Yeah,
And then-
with regard to, you said something to the effect of the Senate may be working on the flexibility language. Do you know that if that gets put in on the Senate side, is it going, and I just can't remember, is it going back to the House or straight to conference committee at that time? Do we know?
Well, Senate Finance, I think, will then go to full Senate, correct?
Oh,
And
it's
then-
in subcommittee. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
it's still,
misunderstood. Still in
that's
subcommittee.
what's happening this weekend. I believe next week, they're still discussing that.
Okay.
So I'm
Well,
no
it can happen
legislative
until it gets back
expert,
to the
but
chamber. Okay.
I think that's where it's going next.
Thank you.
Ms. Agostini, did I see you had a question?
Yes, thank
Okay,
you.
yeah.
So will there be a step increase also with this $4,000 pay increase?
That's a good question. And there've been a lot of questions about the salary increases. I think it gets very confused and confusing for primary reason when for example, let's use the teacher salary schedule. When we implement any sort of increase on the teacher salary schedule, they just see one number, it's a number, and then it's increased, okay? And if their experience went up, they just go to where they are. So they're just seeing a total increase in their pay, okay? There actually are two components that make up an employee's potential increase in most years. Not every year, but in most years. One of those components, if nothing changes on the salary schedule, and it is exactly the way it is today, every year they will get their step increase, which is there already without increasing that salary schedule. Those increases on different salary schedules, they're not perfectly the same anywhere. And quite frankly, even on the teacher salary schedule, it has gotten very muddy with them increasing in the past year or so by dollar amounts. When they start doing dollar amount increases, those steps start washing away, because $1,000 for a teacher making a higher salary and $1,000 for a teacher making half that, it's going to mess those percentages up. So that is one piece of it. That is required, period. There's only been one or two times that I've seen them waive that. One of them was back in, I think, 08, 09, the financial crisis. And then a year or so before was the year that we had to come back to you guys and implement that step increase later in the year. They gave us the ability.
There has to be language in the bill that says no step increase this year.
It has to be actually written in there.
So the key a lot of the times is whether they are funding from the state to a district for some of that step. But the step is almost automatic unless they include language that says a step is waived this year.
That is correct.
Because of lack of funding.
That's correct. So that's one piece of it. The other aspect of it is if there's a mandated salary schedule increase, okay? And that relates specifically to the salary schedule. So in years past, that increase typically is done by a percentage. They will take that base and increase the percentage by 2%, 4%, and we will have to increase every cell by that percentage. When that's the methodology used going forward, I think the Lord said it's time to be done. I will try and talk very quickly. I'm so sorry. Y'all are being very still. But when they did that, it keeps the integrity of those steps intact. But given that $1,000 or a $2,000, $4,000, it definitely muddies it a lot. But that is actually an increase to the salary schedule, which translates over as an increase for that employee as well. Okay? So there are the two components of the increase. There are some years there's not been any increase to the teacher salary schedule, and therefore all that basically we were mandated to do and all we may have done is give the step increase. Does that help explain it? Unless they put
So it's unclear right now is really the bottom line.
Well, I would say that the step increase right now is clear. And from what I understand, there is no intent to change that. We will need to do the step increase.
Thank you.
Dr. Davis.
I was just say, and I think you answered Ms. Agostini's question, and I know we have individuals that may be watching. So an example may be beneficial to provide clarity. And so I'm not the financial expert in this, but last year, the board approved us to go back and adjust the salary schedule, correct?
Last year, we went back and approved to give employees the step. They did not change the salary schedule.
When we raised the base pay for salary for our staff.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting the years. These years are starting to run together now.
I think that was the previous year, the board approved for us to go back and raise.
That is correct.
The base pay for starting teachers from about $37,000 to about $41,000.
That is correct.
This year. That indeed also impacted us to raise that at different sales on the salary schedule. Had we not done that, we still would have, teachers by virtue of 1 year of experience would have gotten an increase because they had a step. So at every step, they get an increase based on the previous salary. There's been times in the past where we have frozen those things and we kept you at, say, 15 years experience. This is what your pay was. And you actually had 16 years, but we didn't give you that
Well, and I will tell you, the only 2 times that I remember that happening, the time in 0809,
Right.
the state, I think, literally had to roll back their schedule.
They did.
They had to roll it back because you can't tell a teacher who's been teaching for 16 years, well, we're not going to give you 16, we're going to keep you at 15 when
So-
they've taught another year.
So by law, we are required to have a salary schedule that by every year of experience, you get an increase. That is built in. So the question is often asked, will teachers get a step increase? Yes, unless we freeze the steps. If you get that step, you will get.
If they're eligible.
If they're eligible. Yeah.
Sorry,
I mean, I know there are a lot
the
of
disclaimer, if
caveats.
they're eligible.
And I understand it. We're talking just in terms of, in general, if they're eligible, they'll get the pay increase. So I think the question that was asked, with this money that the state is allocating, does this include allowing us or helping us to give our teachers, our employees, a step increase? And I think the simple answer to that, is not really, or no.
The funding's not there. It not only allows it, currently it mandates it.
Right.
But it does not include that as part of the funding formula to fund that.
If you remember when we had the retro?
Yes.
Because the continuing resolution froze the step. Remember, they allocated a $50 million special allocation for us to use to give that retroactive step. And we actually got state funds.
Right.
We had supplement with
right.
local funds. We actually got state funds to implement that retroactive step.
Now.
But this right now, it is included in the language that we give the step, but right now there's no funding allocated to District 2 for any of that step.
Right. And that language is included that we give the step. That's always really there, right? And that's the thing, it's always really there that we give the step unless they say we don't give the step. So we know we have to give the step. Our salary allows that if we give the step, teachers will, individuals that are eligible will get the step. However, the money that they're allocating to us is really based on those cells that are below the state salary scale. Our cells are above, for most part, the vast majority of our cells are above the state salary scale, which we did that in a previous allocation of budget to catch our teachers up and put them well above to be competitive in our efforts to recruit and retain teachers. We budgeted for that, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. McFadden.
So on page 13, it says the current state required disclosure available to the public, and it has a list of things. The first one is the monthly transparency reporting of all non-salary expenditures greater than $100 for checks, credit cards, and other transactions. I know that there was a situation in a couple other districts around us that for credit cards, I see one of the credit cards. I don't know how many does our district have, because I do see transactions, but I think it's only one credit card that's online that I can actually see.
Well, it's our procurement card. We don't have like credit card, like we don't have credit cards floating around. We have a procurement card program, which is more of a structured credit. It's not just an open credit card. You can go buy whatever. There are certain restrictions on that card. So you cannot go into the liquor store and purchase alcohol, or, there's certain restrictions on what you can purchase with that card. So all of our cards, we have more than one card, but all of our cards are on that. It's the Bank of America statement, I think, is how we refer to it. But
so are all the transactions from all those cards on that?
It's online.
Yep.
Every month.
It's all out there.
I think that was, the second one, it says annual administrative cost reporting. I don't know where I would find that out.
That's a report that we share with the State Department of Education. I'll have to look and find where they post it, but I think it's out on their website.
Okay, that's on.
They post that information. I'll have to find the link,
Okay,
and
that's
maybe
fine.
we'll share it with you in 4 dots.
And I don't know what the Insight reporting or the ESSA reporting is, so I'll just make my way down that list. I don't know what those are. I think this is probably the first time that I've seen either of those. I may have seen it in that budget book, but didn't know.
No, some of these are actually out on the State Department's website. So the Insight reporting is out on their website, and it gives information for every school district in the state. It takes dollar information and puts it in per pupil terminology. I don't know that they'll still use that when we go to this new formula. I'm really not sure what they're going to do with it, but But for years past, you can go out and look at that and compare it to other school districts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you.
Okay, last slide, and this again is very preliminary. We have received allocations from the State Department of Education with the House portion of the budget. So very well could change once the Senate Finance does their work. I was honestly hoping that today I'd be able to come in with the hot off the press report and say the BA met and they increased their projections and the Senate Finance might have extra money to try and, put in here, but that didn't happen. They did not amend their projections. So at this point, we're probably still looking at the funds that they have out there to utilize unless they reallocate it some other way. It's probably, we can just continue talking to our senators and expressing our concerns with the method for allocating, but I have a feeling that the funds that are being used are not going to change. All that being said, we have the state projections by category, and we have also got some preliminary updated information from the county. With that information, we are looking at, while our property tax relief dollars are going up, the projections for local property tax is going down. We have asked, for some additional information that primarily is relating to a significant amount of carryover in a prior year where we are not anticipating to make that up in tax dollars this year. So I'm hoping we'll get some more details and that information, we typically will get another update in the next month or so, and hopefully we'll get some updated information from that. The net increase that we're projecting at this point is a little over $11 million. That is a little better once we got the state projections, that there were some additional dollars in some of those other categories. And that sounds like a lot of money, but depending on what increases you already have mandated, you start doing a step increase, you do an 18.1% health insurance increase, a 1% retirement percentage increase. Also remember from our last board meeting, you have $3.5 million that are out in those EIA funds that cover things like our alternative school, a lot of positions that are working with our at-risk students. So if we absorb those expenditures as well, we will probably be able to fund with those dollars the step increase and a step increase for all employees and do those things, but that may be it. So again, this is very early. We could get additional information. The Senate Finance could do something. Senate could, we'll keep being posted on this, but this is our first early projection based on what we have for the revenue side.
So with that, it would have to, I'm sorry.
Ms. McFadden.
So with that, we'd have to be responsible for that step every single year.
Every year we have to be responsible for the step, yes.
But that money isn't going to be coming every year, is it? The money that's here, we would have to assume that that is going to be coming every year unless they cut us. So, I mean, we're not getting any additional funding. We are going to be funding the step increase at the local level with local dollars is basically the equivalent of it. We're not going to get additional state money for that step increase. So basically, if we're unable to provide our teachers with some type of that, I hate to say the
schedule increase.
Yeah,
yes.
Don't want to say it too loud because
yes,
it might not happen. But if we do that, then we would be responsible for doing that every year.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean we won't go backwards. Yep.
The teachers, when they look at the teacher schedule, salary schedule, it's kind of like a contract. I mean, if I work another year, I get a raise, and so they are expecting it and are due that raise. It's just been in the past where we've gotten funding from the state level to assist us with that step increase. But yes, the only way that we cannot do that is if it's waived at the state level. Yes, ma'am.
it's not really sounding like they're on board with that.
I don't see that. Like I said, the only year, because they even came back 2 years ago, the only year I've seen them do that was many, many years ago when the budget crisis was very tough, and they literally rolled their schedule back. And I don't see that at all.
And they're also saying instead of 4,000, they're saying that if they had to adjust it, they're saying now it would only be 2,000 to stretch the dollars.
And I think the Senate Finance is looking at a lot of different options right now across the board. So I'm optimistic that they will come up with, something that might help all districts give some sort of increase, maybe not fund, the full amount they want to, but to do something. So it's as late as it seems, because it's April, with the information we have, it's still early to make a decision because you don't want to make the wrong decision. So, we'll continue to monitor it as we're starting to have some discussions about cost and expenditures and what our needs are, and prioritizing that, but going at it from the standpoint of we might not have a lot of money to do a lot of other things. The other thing we've discussed departmentally and already been starting to communicate is we're asking everybody to take a really hard look at what they are already spending, what their budgets already are paying for. Just because you had this allocation last year, if you didn't use all of it, why? There could be a very valid reason, with pandemic and all, some things didn't happen, but we may need it again this coming year. But if we're not using it, how can we repurpose that? So we'll continue to be looking at and evaluating what we're doing now that, maybe we need to change, shift. I don't like to use the word cut because I hate the thought of cutting anything, but evaluating and repurposing funds to meet any new needs we have.
Dr. Davis.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Manning.
We,
Dr. Holmes, let me get Dr. Davis and I'll come to you.
we use the term strategically abandoned.
That was it. I was sitting there trying to think of it, but it's been a long day. So thank you. That is the word I was looking for. But
Strategic abandonment.
yeah.
Dr. Holmes.
Great report, guys. Very interesting. I appreciate it. Got a question, though. For the step increase portion, I know in the past when a teacher was over the 23 years, I believe it's 23 years that the state mandated for a step, the only increase that a teacher over that unless the district allocated more, I think Richland 28, unless the district allocated more, they did not get an increase unless we implemented an increase. This $4,000 increase that they were talking about, whether they decide to regulate it or make it flexible, were they talking about that for the teachers that were over the state cutoff years of 23 and ours 28, or was that not inclusive of that?
Their schedule is not going beyond 23. So they're not giving anything, any steps beyond 23. So the steps we have in place, because we do actually, I think let's put it this way, when the state sent out and shared the information with us, they cut part of our schedule off and didn't even include it, because I think we're the only district that gives anything beyond a certain point. I think our last little step is like at 45. Now, we do have some plateaus in there where they go a few years without a step, but we're one of the few districts that actually does go in and give steps. All of that is local. Any increase we do above that is a locally funded thing.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to make sure that we were getting clear to the public to understand, because someone with 30 years will hear the $4,000 extra, and that's not going to be inclusive of them.
Other board members, questions or comments? I just want to say a couple things. One, it's interesting to me, Dr. Miley, the decrease from the local property tax in a year where property values, not just personal property vehicles, businesses, that's on the rise. So values are increasing, yet somehow we're in a deficit on local property. I don't understand that.
Some years, I've been doing this about 10 now with the Richland 2. I do not remember that declining from one year to the next. Now, the preliminary explanation was that it was a large carry forward that we wouldn't be able to sustain. We're hoping to go meet with the auditor's office because, again, the boom we've seen in the district, even though some of those individual residential units are not taxable for operating, you know they have cars, and you know there's other properties and investment properties that are going up. We really are surprised to see a negative local property tax number this year. So
yeah, I mean, apartments are one of the number one growing residential units, which is an asset to our
and
property tax. So it really doesn't add up to me.
Quite a bit of multifamily
Right.
residential coming up. Lots of I mean, you just drive out Clemson Road and Killian Road. I mean, it's just. But we're hoping to get a better explanation, and they frequently have revised their numbers. If last year, I remember they gave us an increase towards the latter part of the process, and they increased their estimate. And so these aren't final, but these were kind of surprising to see in a relatively robust economy, because the pandemic wouldn't have impacted property taxes like it did other things as that interruption went through the economy. So we're hoping to get a better explanation, and hopefully they'll be revised. But this was a real shocker.
It's also interesting, they're trying to increase the number of teachers, decreasing student ratio. We can't find the teachers that we already need, much less if we decrease the ratios. And they're not funding the things that our staff and our board have asked for, the socioeconomic component or the social emotional well-being, some of those support positions, which is the number one ask that we have, are not being funded. So that's on us and our local property revenues, decreasing our ability to recruit teachers by eroding our pay above and beyond sort of state minimums. I mean, there's a lot in this that's going to have huge impacts for us, and will really put additional burden on our local property tax regardless of how we go about this. I think the question was asked earlier, why do we not present a budget? And I think this is a big reason why. We have no idea. We need to understand what people want and but we may not get beyond what we have to do and not even be able to get into anything that we want to do. So there's a lot there.
If you remember, roughly 65% of our operating budget is from state revenues.
Right.
And frequently, if you go back the last several years, I can't remember them all in detail, but you'll look at, as we list the additional projects that are funded by that year, we always classify them by, this is a state mandate. This is driven by meeting requirements for compliance. And so several of those things frequently are state-driven expenses as well as the state-driven funding. And so, again, why we don't have a full budget today is we don't know where 65% of our revenues are coming from, and we're not sure what the mandates are from the state yet. So it's a very difficult time, and it's a new wrinkle that I've always said it's a difficult time, but this year they've thrown a new wrinkle in their efforts to destroy public education. So,
well, thank you very much for the presentation. Very
Thank you.
informative. Thank you. We will now move on to our second public participation, which we have no one. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped over a few things here. Let's go to the draft agenda, 11.1, Dr. Davis.
Hey, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, to our community, we have our draft agenda for the April 26, 2022 board meeting, where we'll call our board meeting to order at 5:30, and we will go into executive session. We have student appeals in executive session at this time. We'll come out of our executive session and we'll begin with our inspirational moment and Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the approval of the agenda, asking for the approval of the consent agenda, our first public participation, voting on executive session items. On the new business, no action requested, we'll have the Richland 2 highlights, the capital improvements, and legislative issues. Then we'll move to our review of our draft agenda for the May 10th board meeting, approval of that agenda, public participation 2 if needed, our board and superintendent comments, followed by executive session 2 if needed, and then voting on any executive session 2 items, and then we'll ask for adjournment.
Thank you. Any comments? All right, with no comments, we will move on to approval of that draft agenda. If I can have a motion.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Ms. Mackey.
I move to approve the draft agenda items for April 26, 2022, with the inclusion of an update on executive coaching and parliamentary procedure.
Motion's been made by Ms. Mackey. Do I have a second? Seconded by Dr. Caution Parker. Any discussion? With no discussion, we'll take the vote. Dr. Holmes?
Voting in the affirmative.
Motion passes 6 yes, 1 no. We will now move on to second public participation, which no one has signed up, so we were on to board and superintendent comments. I'll start at my left with Dr. Scott.
Would like to say thank you to Jackson Creek Elementary administration, faculty, and staff for allowing us to use your beautiful facility this evening. Thank you for your time, and especially to our young people with the drum line up there. They did a phenomenal job. So thank you for all that you guys are doing here and continue to do. Want to give a shout out to Ms. Osborne, first grade class here at Jackson Creek. I had an opportunity to read to their first grade class last month, and I promised them some treats. So boys and girls, I will have your treats when you return back from spring break. Be safe while you're out there. I also want to say thank you to Mrs. Carter, the military family. We do love having the military family here and their liaison, so thank you for all that you do. And also to Ms. Owens, thank you for filling in for Mrs. Ruth tonight. You did a phenomenal job. And as always, everyone continue to be safe, have rest over the spring break, be safe, and we look forward to seeing you guys after spring break. Have a good night.
Thank you. I'm going to go to my right now, Mrs. Agostini.
They continue to dim the lights, so I think that's a sign. Thank you, Jackson Creek, for hosting us tonight and for providing the inspirational moment, and wishing all of our students, families, and employees an enjoyable and safe spring break.
Mrs. McFadden.
Good night, everybody, but I would like to say happy birthday to Dr. Holmes. Her birthday was on April the 1st.
Thank you. Dr. Caution Parker.
I'd like to say thank you for the outstanding presentation by the wonderful students here at Jackson Creek and the staff. I'm sorry. I'm not loud enough. Surprising. And just want to say thank you for everything. And I'm very impressed with that program that you have here, the African Studies class. I think that is phenomenal. That's something you might need to share throughout the district and kind of alleviate some of these concerns out there. I think that would just be a wonderful thing to do. But thank you. Great. Congratulations to those who are recognized in the highlights presented by Dr. Davis this evening. And I want to say thank you as an Army brat. I want to say thank you for the month of the military child presentation. I just admire the connection between Richland 2 and the military. I always have admired that since I've been here. In the mid-60s is when we moved here. My father finally settled down and we were here. But it's just been wonderful, and all the work that the district and Fort Jackson do to work together that help the children is phenomenal. And having lived all over the world, I can tell you it is phenomenal here in Columbia. Also want to say I hope that everyone enjoys a safe and wonderful holiday, and see you when we get back. Thank you.
Ms. Mackey.
Again, just reiterating National Assistant Principals Week. Congratulations as we celebrate our assistant principals. Richland 2 Future Chefs competition that was, week before last? Was amazing, getting an opportunity to see students work with Sodexo, and there were people who'd been here since 5 o'clock that morning and stayed that afternoon helping our young chefs, and I think I got to sample just about everything. London Springs on Rice Creek was a winner, 3rd grade there. We appreciate her efforts. Jaden Bostick, who appeared at our last board meeting, had his book signing, official book signing last weekend, so happy for him. Kudos to the Richland 2. I know there are lots of people who were part of the the inaugural Partnership Summit. It was an amazingly intimate and engaging event. Kudos for that and all the efforts that are taken to engage our community. And finally, to Dr., I think they finally got Maso Taylor, Mr. Jones, and Ms. Sade, Funga Alafia Ashe Ashe. I remember learning that song from my pastor at the time, who is from Tanzania. He taught that song to us as we were teaching the Vacation Bible School teachers at that time. He taught us the song, and we were able to share it with our students, and it means, welcome, how are you? Hope you are fine. It was an amazingly appropriate song for this evening, and so just enjoy that enrichment, that little bit of learning. And for everyone who is here who's got to be, thank you. For those who choose to be, bless you. Y'all have a wonderful spring break and a good evening. Thanks.
Dr. Holmes?
Okay, good evening. Sorry that I wasn't with you all tonight, but I would first like to say congratulations and thank you for our National Assistant Principals Week. I used to do that job. I know exactly how hard you work. You are highly appreciated. Also for the cognitive STEMs at Westwood High School, that is a phenomenal feat to have achieved that. Jackson Creek, thank you for having us. And though I wasn't there tonight, I appreciate everything that you did for our colleagues. I love the African American history class. I will be asking to come and see you all in person because I'd love to see that in action. Let's see, the STEM Educator of the Year, congratulations. Drill Team, Spring Valley High School, best in the state, congratulations. Also, the Military Child, Kelsey, you did a fantastic job of also presenting that also again. And lastly, thank you, and I hope that you have a great spring break. And thank you, Ms. McFadden, for mentioning my birthday. I appreciate that. I'm glad to see another one. But with that, it's late, and good night.
Thank you, Dr. Davis.
I want to start off just simply saying thank you to our Richland School Board for another outstanding meeting. I know you won't get emails about how effective the meeting ran today, so I wanted to be the first to say thank you for conducting another outstanding meeting for our students and for our community. I want to also thank our staff for all the wonderful work that they've done in their presentations, being thorough and succinct, as well as to Jackson Creek for allowing us to be here today. Shout outs to Dr. Maso Taylor and to her staff on the courage and the vision for the African American Studies program courses here at Jackson Creek Elementary. I really appreciate and seeing and you mentioning how this aligns to the district's mission and vision of our school district. So thank you all for that as well. And I would be remiss if I allowed this day to pass without just simply saying what a wonderful day it was. I had an opportunity, as many of you, to witness the confirmation of Ketanji Onika Brown Jackson as the first African-American woman to be confirmed to the the U.S. Supreme Court. So that's phenomenal to be able to witness that moment in history live. And I'm so grateful and thankful for that opportunity. I had a great professional development opportunity over the last couple of weeks as a leader myself, and as many of you all are, to watch a leader demonstrate poise and grace under a lot of pressure and scrutiny. And it was just amazing to watch. And I learned a lot from watching her deal with the issues during the confirmation. So congratulations to her and her family. Be safe. Have a wonderful spring break. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you all when we return.
Thank you. I also want to thank the board for a fantastic meeting, very productive. We got a lot done, a lot of really critical information that's coming to us. And I saw some numbers. I didn't realize I knew we had a lot of families military. I didn't realize the percentage is much bigger than I expected, even knowing how important military families are to us. So you never stop learning, no matter how long you're in this position, and information that comes at you. I also want to thank Dr. Holmes. I know several of us attended the National School Boards Association meeting. I think we saw the importance of committee work, and when we look at budget, we look at our students' academic achievement, and we look at safety. of our students being 3 of the biggest priorities that we have, and Dr. Holmes is working with Dr. Davis and the board to create those 3 committees so that we can obviously we need a deeper dive on finance, we need a deeper dive on security. We had a discussion tonight in executive session. There's a lot for us to discuss. And then certainly academics is one of the core reasons that we're here, to make sure that we're on point. So I'm excited to see those committees come to fruition and the work that we'll do as a board in concert with administration. So thank you, Dr. Davis and the board, Dr. Holmes, for your leadership and asking for those committees to be created. With that, y'all enjoy a great spring break. If I can have a request for, or a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Ms. Mackey.
move to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Ms. Mackey made the motion. Do I have a second? Seconded by Dr. Caution Parker. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. Dr. Holmes.
Good night. Yes.
Thank you. Unanimous. We're adjourned.